Today, we are going to talk about a situation that calls into question the very fundamental principles of our democracy. A recent incident in Parliament has unleashed a wave of outrage and left us with a big question. Can we really trust our representatives when the system seems to be completely biased? On this occasion, the center of the controversy is Greg Fergus, who, as Speaker of the House, was supposed to be the impartial arbiter of the debate. However, his recent behavior has caused many to wonder if he is really capable of fulfilling that function fairly. After more than 3 decades in Canadian politics, Fergus was expected to maintain a neutral stance. But it seems that he has fallen into the trap of openly favoring only one side. When you have the power to control the flow of debate, the weight of responsibility is enormous. But when that power is used to silence opponents or turn a deaf ear to criticism, democracy is severely affected. That's exactly what's been happening with Fergus. And worst of all, it's not just a matter of isolated mistakes. It seems that it has become a common strategy. In the last confrontation in the House, Pierre Poilievre, yes, the leader of the opposition, stood up to point out Fergus's clear bias. Poilievre did not hesitate to point out that the president had not only failed in his duty to be impartial, but that his actions were blatantly favoring Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his agenda. What followed was a confrontation that left many speechless. Instead of defending his impartiality, Fergus chose to silence Poilievre, cutting off his microphone, something many saw as a desperate act to protect his own political agenda. This incident has highlighted a worrying trend. If the Speaker of the House, the figure in charge of maintaining order and justice in debates, is willing to act in such a partisan manner, what is left for the democratic system? What is the point of talking about impartiality if those who must apply it are the first to break it? And it is not just a matter of a fight between politicians. Society in general is taking note of what is happening. Social media has erupted in criticism, and what began as an internal bipartisan discussion has turned into a widespread call for responsibility and accountability. Canadians, for the most part, are not willing to tolerate their representatives continuing to play by the rules of the game. As the pressure on Fergus grows, the question becomes, can he really continue to lead the House? Can someone who has failed to remain impartial continue to represent the interests of all citizens equally? What is at stake here is not just the reputation of an individual, but the integrity of the entire parliamentary system. If the referee can't play fair, who will? And while the government tries to defend the indefensible, opponents are seizing this opportunity to position themselves as the true defenders of democratic values. In this type of confrontation, what is at stake is much more than a simple political victory. It is the future of a system that many fear is being manipulated to protect the powerful. Citizens are watching, and their patience has a limit. What started as an isolated incident could trigger a series of much bigger consequences if the right decisions aren't made now. The demand for fairness, impartiality, and transparency has never been higher, and now is the time to act. What makes this situation even more complex is the lack of accountability in the political arena. The response of the Liberal Party and the NDP in supporting Greg Fergus at this critical time is raising a lot of eyebrows. Are they really defending democracy, or are they just trying to save one of their own? The implications of this attitude go beyond politics. It is a clear reflection of a system that is comfortable with manipulating the rules in its favor. The reaction of the parties that continue to support Fergus has become a public spectacle that has not gone unnoticed. If the public begins to see that the system is being manipulated to protect the few, confidence in the democratic process will plummet. And in this climate of growing distrust, the decisions made by certain politicians are now seen as a desperate attempt to maintain power, rather than to do what is best for the country. The problem isn't just with Fergus. It is a symptom of a political system that often seems more focused on protecting its own interests than on defending democratic principles. How many times have we seen cases where those responsible for enforcing the law or maintaining order in the political system are involved in conflicts of interest. The line between fairness and partisanship has been increasingly blurred, and the damage this causes is incalculable. What is happening in Parliament is not only an internal matter of Canadian politics, it is a reflection of what is happening in many democracies around the world. People are no longer willing to tolerate manipulations and abuse of power. Street protests and social media campaigns are just the tip of the iceberg. Citizens are becoming aware that it is not enough to vote every 4 years. Constant vigilance is now needed so that politicians do not turn democracy into a circus in which the public no longer has a voice. The case of Greg Fergus and his bias in Parliament has only been the trigger for a much larger conversation. Canadians are beginning to understand that while political parties may have their differences, what is really at stake is the ability of institutions to function fairly and equitably. If the system has become corrupted to such an extent that not even the referees can remain neutral, then we are not talking about a democracy, but a facade of democracy. The mounting pressure on Fergus is just the beginning. Citizens are demanding accountability, not only from him, but from the entire political system that has allowed these problems to persist for so long. If the government does not listen to these demands and take action to restore public trust, the damage will be irreparable. People are tired of the same old games, the same behind-the-scenes dealings, the same manipulations that are done in the name of politics. The stakes here are much higher than a simple controversy over the impartiality of a House Speaker. It is about the health of our democracy. If the people lose confidence that the rules apply equally to everyone, then the entire system will be compromised. And that brings us to the next question. Can we really expect this system of government to fairly represent all citizens if impartiality is not respected at the highest levels? It's not just about Canadian politics. This is a global problem. Modern democracies are being challenged by a lack of transparency, by the concentration of power in the hands of a few, and by citizens' growing distrust of their governments. Canadians, like many others around the world, are beginning to ask, who is really making the decisions, and on whose behalf? With every vote, with every intervention in Parliament, with every move by politicians, the people are watching. And if the system does not begin to take serious measures to correct the imbalances that are being shown, the consequences may be much deeper than we imagine. Elections will not only determine who is in power, but whether the system will remain legitimate in the eyes of those who support it, the people. In the midst of all this, there is one figure who has come out on top, Poilievre, the leader of the opposition.